Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that your entire life fits inside a box. Not a room, not a house, a box. Barely wide enough to stretch your arms, too low to stand upright, always moving, always shaking. This was home. What we now call the Oregon Trail has been painted as something heroic, a grand movement west, golden light, endless horizons, brave families chasing destiny. But from inside the wagon, there was no golden light. There was wood pressing into your back, the smell of grease soaked deep into the boards, the constant jolt of iron wheels hitting rock after rock, day after day. Sleep didn't come easily. Comfort didn't exist. The wagon wasn't built for people. It was built for cargo. And yet, families climbed inside anyway, with children, with everything they owned, and pointed themselves toward a horizon they had never seen. They would live like this for months, through heat that cracked the earth, through cold nights where breath turned to frost, through rain that slipped through the canvas and soaked everything they had. And still, they kept moving, because staying behind felt worse. That's the part history rarely tells you. The Oregon Trail was not driven by adventure. It was driven by pressure, by necessity, by the quiet fear that life where you stood was already failing. So people made a decision that sounds simple, but cost everything. They climbed into a moving box and chose the unknown. Inside the wagon, space was not just limited, it was negotiated. Every object had to justify its existence. Every inch had to earn its place. Flour stacked in heavy sacks, bacon salted and wrapped tight, coffee, sugar, dried beans, small comforts measured carefully, then tools, axes, spare parts, rope, chains, everything needed to survive what lay ahead and build something at the end. And after all of that, there was barely room left for the people. A family of 4 lived inside a space no larger than a modern bathroom. At night, they folded themselves into gaps between crates. Children curled where they could. Adults slept at angles their bodies would remember in the morning. And the wagon never truly rested, even when it stopped. The motion lingered, the creaking wood, the faint sway of the frame, the memory of movement still living in the bones. During the day, most didn't even ride. They walked, mile after mile, across grasslands that stretched endlessly, through mud that swallowed shoes whole, over stone that tore through leather and skin alike. The wagon was too heavy, the animals too valuable. So people walked to protect the very thing that carried their lives. Blisters became calluses, calluses became wounds, and still they walked, because the wagon wasn't just transport, it was survival. Lose the wagon, and you lost everything. And slowly, quietly, something changed. The idea of comfort disappeared. The idea of home shifted. Home was no longer a place. It was whatever moved and didn't break. After a few days, you begin to notice the sound. At first, it feels overwhelming. A constant noise that never quite stops. Wood groaning under weight. Iron rims grinding against stone. Chains rattling with every movement of the oxen. But over time, something strange happens. The noise becomes normal. It settles into the background of your mind, like a heartbeat you no longer notice, but never truly escapes. The wagon speaks constantly. Every rut in the ground sends a shock through the frame. Every rock travels upward, through the wheels, through the floor, into your body. If you sit inside too long, you feel it in your bones. A deep, dull ache. Bruises forming where nothing struck you, except time and motion. This is why most people walk. Not because it is easier, but because it hurts less. And still, Even outside the wagon, the sound follows you. The slow, heavy rhythm of hooves, the creak of leather harness, the quiet breathing of animals pulling more than they were meant to carry. At night, when everything finally stops, the silence feels unfamiliar, too still, too empty. And in that silence, you begin to hear other things: the wind moving through open land, a distant animal calling across the dark, the quiet shifting of people around you trying to rest, and beneath it all, something else, a feeling, not fear exactly, not yet, but the awareness that you are very far from anything safe. In the beginning, it doesn't feel impossible. The grass is green, water is still easy to find, the air carries the freshness of spring, and for a short while, the journey almost feels manageable. Wagon trains move together, 15, maybe 30 wagons at a time. There is structure, a rhythm. Wake before sunrise. Harness the oxen in the pale morning light. Begin moving as the world slowly brightens around you. The pace is slow, 2 miles an hour, sometimes less, but the distance adds up. 15 miles in a day if things go well, 18 if the land is kind. And in those early days, people still talk about the future, about the land waiting for them, about farms that will grow easily, about a life that feels just within reach. Children laugh more often. They still have energy to run alongside the wagons, to explore the edges of camp in the evening light. At night, fires are lit. Food is cooked. Voices carry softly across the circle of wagons. There is something almost comforting about it. A temporary village, moving through an endless landscape. But even here, the reality is already shifting. Shoes begin to wear thin. Food supplies are quietly measured. Small illnesses appear and linger, and the horizon never seems to get closer. That is when the first realization begins to settle in. This is not a journey measured in days. It is measured in endurance. And the question is no longer how far you've come, but whether you can keep going. There is something no painting ever captured: the smell. It is the first thing that truly settles into your memory, and the last thing that ever leaves. At the beginning, you notice it immediately: bacon grease, soaked deep into the wooden boards. It leaks slowly from its container, no matter how carefully it's sealed. Axle grease, thick and sharp, a mix of tallow and tar that clings to everything it touches. Wet wool after a night of rain, heavy, damp, impossible to fully dry. And beneath it all, the close, warm presence of bodies. Because when the nights turn cold, everyone climbs inside. Parents, children, sometimes others, pressed together, sharing whatever warmth they can create. The air becomes thick, still, and after a while, there's no fresh air left. At first, it feels unpleasant, but like everything else on the trail, you adapt. The smell stops being something you notice and becomes something you live inside. It settles into your clothes, into your hair, into your skin, until even when you step outside, you carry it with you. It is the scent of survival, not clean, not comfortable, but real. And strangely, it becomes familiar. Despite everything, there is structure. There has to be. Without routine, the journey would fall apart. Morning and evening revolve around one thing: fire. Cooking never happens inside the wagon. It happens outside, where the land allows it. But the land doesn't always cooperate. On the open plains, wood is scarce. There are no forests to gather from, no fallen branches waiting to be used. So people learn, quickly, to adapt. They gather buffalo chips, dried dung, scattered across the grasslands. It burns hot, cleaner than you'd expect. and soon it becomes normal. The first time feels strange, unnatural, but hunger doesn't leave room for hesitation. Food itself is simple: bacon, beans, cornmeal, hardtack, dry, brittle, almost tasteless. Sometimes dried fruit, if it hasn't run out yet. Coffee, always coffee. It is one of the few comforts that remains. Something warm, something familiar, something that reminds you of a life before this. 1. Midday meals are rare. There is no time, no energy to stop, unpack, cook, and continue. So people eat while moving. Cold food, quick bites, fuel, more than enjoyment. But sometimes there are moments: a successful hunt, fresh meat over the fire. And those meals stay with people, not because they were luxurious, but because they were different. A reminder that not everything had been lost. And in those small moments, hope quietly returns. Water is never just water on the trail. It is a calculation, a decision, sometimes a gamble. At the start of the journey, it feels abundant. Clear creeks, flowing rivers, cool, moving water that seems reliable, but slowly, that changes. Streams begin to thin, creeks dry into shallow mud, and the distance between water sources stretches, just enough to make people quiet, because everyone understands. What happens if the next water isn't there? By midsummer, the easy sources are gone, and what remains is not always safe. Some water smells of sulfur, sharp, bitter, unnatural. Some looks clear, but carries something unseen. People drink it anyway. They have to. And then come the consequences: stomach pain, weakness, illness that arrives quietly and spreads quickly. No one fully understands why. They only know that once it starts, it can take everything. Animals suffer too. Oxen hesitate at the edge of certain streams. They sense something wrong, even before people do. And when an ox falls ill, it is not just an animal lost. It is movement lost, distance lost, possibly survival itself. So every crossing becomes a moment of tension, every drink a risk, and slowly the trail teaches a hard truth: you are not in control, you are only responding. There were thousands of children on the Oregon Trail, and they experienced it differently. The youngest barely understood it at all. They slept through the noise, curled into blankets as the wagon shook around them. For them, the world was small. The inside of the wagon, the voices of their parents, the rhythm of emotion. But older children knew more. They walked, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They gathered fuel for the fire, carried water from distant creeks, helped guide livestock along the moving line of wagons. There was no concept of childhood, the way we understand it now. At 10 years old, you worked, and the work mattered. A missed task could mean no fire, no water, no meal. So children learned quickly, faster than they should have needed to. They learned how to read the land, how to recognize danger, how to keep moving, even when they were tired. And yet, they were still children. In the evenings, when the wagons formed a circle, they ran. They played between shadows and firelight. They laughed when there was still energy left for it. Those moments were brief, but they were real, because even in a place defined by hardship, human nature finds space to breathe. Still, the trail did not spare them. Children were the most vulnerable to illness, to exhaustion, to the quiet dangers no one could fully prevent. And when loss came, it came fast. A child healthy in the morning, gone by nightfall, wrapped in cloth, buried beside the trail, and the next morning, the wagon moved again, because it had to. At some point, everyone notices them. At first, it's just one, a small mound beside the trail, fresh earth, darker than the ground around it, maybe marked with a simple piece of wood, maybe not marked at all. People don't say much when they pass it. They look briefly, then look away, and keep walking. But then there are more. Another grave, a mile later, then another, sometimes close together, sometimes scattered across the land like quiet reminders. No names, no dates, just evidence that someone didn't make it. And slowly, the meaning becomes unavoidable. This is not just a path forward. It is a path lined with endings. Cholera is the most feared. It moves fast, faster than anything people understand. A person can be fine in the morning and gone by night. There is no time to prepare, no time to accept, only time to act. A shallow grave is dug, quickly, hands working through hard soil, eyes avoiding what they cannot change. A few words are spoken, if there is strength left for words. Then the wagon moves. It has to, because stopping means risking everything else. This is the part that stays with people, not the moment itself, but what comes after. The silence, the absence in the wagon, the space where someone used to be, and the unbearable truth that the journey continues anyway. By the time the journey reaches its middle, something begins to change, not in the land, but in the decisions people make. At the start, everything felt important. Every object carried meaning. A chair from home, a set of dishes, a book, a small piece of a life that was left behind. But the trail has its own logic. And that logic is simple. If it slows you down, it goes. The first things to be left behind are practical. Extra tools, heavy equipment, anything that adds weight without immediate use. Then, harder choices begin. Furniture, keepsakes, objects that once felt essential now become burdens. And the trail fills with them. Abandoned stoves sitting alone in the grass. Broken wagons left where they failed. Personal belongings scattered across miles of land. It becomes something strange, almost surreal. A road made of what people could not carry anymore. Each object tells a story, not of carelessness, but of necessity. No one wanted to leave these things behind. They had to, because the animals were tiring, because the wheels were straining, because survival demanded less weight. And eventually, the question shifts. It is no longer, what do we need to bring? It becomes, what can we afford to lose? And once that question begins, it never truly stops. Somewhere along the trail, you stop feeling like yourself. Not suddenly, not in a single moment, but slowly, quietly, your body begins to change. At first, it's small things. Soreness that doesn't go away overnight. A stiffness in the morning that lingers through the day. Then it becomes something more. Your hands roughen, skin cracks under dry wind and constant work. Small cuts that never fully heal. Your feet take the worst of it. Blisters form, break, harden into calluses. And sometimes they don't heal properly. Infection sets in. A slow, hidden danger, carried with every step. Weight begins to drop. Not by choice, but because the body is burning more than it receives. Meals are simple, repetitive, enough to continue, but rarely enough to restore. Clothes hang differently. Faces become sharper, and the eyes change. They become focused, not distant, but narrowed. Attention shifts to what matters most. The next mile, the next task, the next decision. Energy is no longer wasted because there is none to spare. And yet, you keep going, not because you feel strong, but because stopping is not an option you can allow yourself to consider. If the body carries the weight, the mind carries the uncertainty. Every day brings decisions. small ones, constant ones, where to stop, when to move, how far to push the animals, whether to risk a crossing or wait. None of these decisions feel final on their own, but together they shape survival. And the hardest part is this: you never truly know if you're making the right choice. There is no clear path, no certainty, only judgment, based on limited knowledge and growing fatigue. At first, people talk things through, discuss options, weigh risks together. But over time, the conversations change. They become shorter, more direct, because energy is limited and doubt is exhausting. Stress builds slowly, not as panic, but as pressure, a constant awareness that one mistake could cost everything. Sleep doesn't always help. Even at rest, the mind continues, running through possibilities, replaying decisions, anticipating what might come next. And then there is the horizon, always there, always distant. It never seems closer. No matter how far you travel, it remains just out of reach. That is when the journey becomes something else, not just physical, but mental endurance, the ability to continue without clear reassurance, to move forward without knowing if forward is enough. And for many, this becomes the true challenge, not the distance, but the uncertainty that comes with it. At some point, the land changes, the green fades, the soft ground disappears, and what replaces it feels unforgiving. The air grows drier, the wind sharper, dust begins to follow everything. It clings to skin, to clothes, to the inside of your mouth. Water becomes harder to trust. Streams shrink or vanish entirely. What remains is often thick with minerals, bitter, heavy, and yet still necessary. The animals feel it first. Oxen slow down. Their steps lose rhythm. Heads hang lower with each mile. They drink less, even when they need it most, because something in the water is wrong. And when an ox begins to fail, everyone notices. Movement slows, distance shrinks, and tension rises quietly through the group. Because without the animals, the wagon doesn't move, and without the wagon, nothing else matters. The ground itself becomes an obstacle. Loose sand that drags at every step, hard rock that cracks wheels and bruises bodies. Each mile demands more effort for less progress, and slowly, a realization settles in. This land does not care if you pass through it. It does not help you. It does not guide you. It simply exists, indifferent to whether you survive. The oxen are the silent force behind everything. They don't speak. They don't complain. But every mile depends on them, large, slow, steady. They were chosen not for speed, but for endurance. And for a long time, they carry the weight without protest. But the trail wears them down. Just like it wears down everything else, you begin to notice the signs. A slight hesitation when moving, a slower response to commands, breathing heavier, even at rest. At first, it's easy to ignore. Everyone is tired. But then, one stops. It doesn't collapse dramatically. It simply refuses to move. The line halts. People gather. Voices stay low, because everyone understands what this could mean. The animal is unhitched, given time, given space. But sometimes, it doesn't recover. And when that happens, a decision must be made, quickly. There is no room for hesitation. The ox cannot stay. It cannot be carried. It cannot be saved. So it is left behind, or used for what it can still provide: food, materials, anything, because nothing can be wasted. And then, the wagon moves again, pulled by fewer animals, under the same weight, and everyone feels it. Not just physically, but mentally, Because each loss brings a quiet question closer to the surface. How much more can we afford to lose? By now, the trail begins to look different, not because the land has changed, but because of what lies on it. Every few miles, something is left behind. At first, it was small things, broken tools, worn out supplies, but now it is more. A cast iron stove, sitting alone in the grass, a wooden chair, tipped on its side, a trunk half open, its contents scattered by wind and time. These were not careless decisions. These were things people once believed they could not live without. Things packed with intention, with memory. And now, they are gone, left behind in silence, because the trail demands it. The wagons are too heavy, the animals too tired, and survival has no patience for sentiment. So people stop, look at what they've carried all this way, and make a choice. Not easily, never easily, but firmly. And once something is left behind, it is not retrieved. The wagon moves forward, and the object becomes part of the trail, a quiet marker of what someone had to give up to keep going. Over time, these markers multiply. The road becomes a record, not just of movement, but of sacrifice. A path built not only from distance, but from everything that could not be carried any further. There is a part of the journey that feels endless, not the beginning, where hope is still fresh, not the end, where something waits, but the middle, where every day feels the same. Wake, walk, endure, sleep, repeat. The land stretches without change. No clear landmarks, no sense of progress, only distance, measured in effort. This is where time begins to blur. Days lose their identity. Weeks pass without feeling different, and the mind starts to drift. Not into dreams, but into routine. You stop thinking about the destination. It is too far, too abstract. Instead, you focus on what is in front of you, the next step, the next mile, the next task. Because thinking beyond that is too much. Fatigue settles deeper, not sharp, not overwhelming, just constant, a weight that never lifts. And yet, this is where something important happens. People adapt, not by becoming stronger, but by becoming efficient. Movements become automatic. Decisions become quicker. Energy is conserved wherever possible. And slowly, the impossible becomes routine. Not easier, but familiar. And in that familiarity, there is a quiet kind of endurance, the kind that doesn't look heroic, but is. Eventually, something begins to change, not in the body, not in the effort, but in the air. There is a subtle shift. The nights grow colder again. The wind carries a different feeling, and the land begins to rise. Mountains appear in the distance. At first, faint, almost unreal. But with each day, they become clearer, larger, closer. And with them comes a new kind of tension, because everyone knows this is the final barrier, the last test. And it is the most dangerous of all. The passes must be crossed before the snow arrives. Timing becomes everything. Each delay matters. Each mistake costs more than before. The wagons move carefully now, slower in some places, faster in others, always balancing risk. The terrain is narrow, steep, unforgiving. One wrong turn, one unstable crossing, and the consequences are immediate. And yet, there is something else too, something quiet, but unmistakable. A sense that the end is real, not imagined anymore, not distant, but close enough to almost believe. When they finally arrive, it doesn't feel the way you'd expect. There is no single moment of triumph, no clear line where everything changes. Instead, it happens slowly. The land softens. Water becomes easier to find. Grass grows thicker again, and the mountains fall behind. People begin to realize they made it, but the feeling is not celebration. It is something quieter, relief, mixed with exhaustion, because the journey has taken something from everyone. Bodies are worn, clothes are torn, supplies are nearly gone, and inside, people are different, stronger perhaps, but also changed. They have seen things they will not forget, graves along the trail, loss that had no time for mourning, decisions that could not be undone, and yet they are here. New land, new beginnings, but not new people, because the journey came with them, and in quiet moments, long after the wagon stopped moving, they would remember the sound, the motion, the weight of those endless miles, and the simple, undeniable truth they crossed it. And now, as that long journey comes to rest, you can let your mind do the same. The Oregon Trail was never just a path across land. It was a test of endurance, of quiet strength, of continuing, even when there was no certainty ahead. Not a story of perfect heroes, but of real people, moving forward one step at a time. And maybe that's why it still stays with us, because in some way, we all know what it means to keep going, even when the destination isn't clear yet. So tonight, let the trail fade into the distance. Let the wagon come to a stop, and let your thoughts slow down with it. If you enjoyed this quiet journey through history, consider subscribing to The Sleeping Historian, where we explore the past slowly and gently, one story at a time. For now, rest, and I'll see you in the next story.